Let's feast. I don't know why I did that.
Okay, all y'all niggas fool as fuck. I'm ULT and I don't fuck with you if you ain't us. In me I trust, I turn these niggas into cosmic dust. I'm loaded Lux with a loaded K, cop back, I spray, I bust. That player shit, that Raider shit still running through my blood. These brand new niggas took my name and drug it through the mud.
I like that. This is a good opening to the podcast. We're all in jovial spirits, but it's not just me and Tim this week. No, we have a third spirit of joviality. Yes. It's an old friend, a dear friend, but by no means a near friend. How are things going early in the morning where you are, Tara?
Well, quite lovely considering how early it is in the morning. I'm doing fine. Really happy to be with both of you.
And I'm happy to have you here. Thank you very much for joining us. As we said, this is the End Podcast. You can find us on all platforms. The End Pod one-shots on YouTube. We are on Apple Podcasts, Spotify Podcasts. We are on Google Podcasts. We are on SoundCloud. We upload art to Instagram, and we also post reviews on Twitter. So it's fairly comprehensive. So out of all those choices, if you haven't followed us, liked us, or commented on one of our exemplary podcasts or uploads, shame on you. Shame on you.
We've been really crushing it too.
It's kind of crushing, isn't it,
Yeah.
Tim? Like, I feel that our best podcast has been since we jettisoned all the deadwood.
We've been so good. I mean, like, how good.
I feel like we've gone on to heights we couldn't have even imagined. I actually feel they were holding us back.
The conversations that we have every week are like 10 standard deviations above our prior meeting.
I would go as far as to say this is the Empyrean version of our podcast. Yeah. This is the seventh heaven of the End podcast. We would also like to mention that Tara is again here with us this week, and also
what that makes me.
Joe Goose, and Brian will also be making appearances soon. We're just having jokes in with Tim. We're having jokes. We miss them all. We just wish that I had more time to involve everybody more often. We miss them all. About introspection. Boy, oh boy, Tim. Boy, oh boy, Squid Game. There is a lot to unpack.
Yeah, there is.
So much to unpack. I mean, it's like all the other topics put together. Why cancelled? Eternal's reaction, Batman trailers, gay Superman, bisexual Superman. We got Hickman. If you put all that and rolled it up into a tidy little package in a little black box and tied a ribbon around it and put it in a crematorium,
Nice.
That's where we would be with Squid Game, my man.
Yep. Should we just give, I assume that everyone has seen at least part of this, but maybe just give, I'll give maybe just like 3 sentences on generally what the show's about. So basically we have a show in which
I'll just say that it's spoilers throughout. So to be fair, if you ain't watched Squid Game by now, don't blame Tim. Don't blame me.
You haven't seen that.
Blame Tara. Tara's the new girl.
All right, so we got this show. It's a South Korean show on streams on Netflix. You can watch it, I believe, in dub or sub. I saw it in dub. So the show is basically where you have the social losers, the social and economic losers of sort of global capitalism are recruited, and these are all people who are just tremendous amount of debt, and all of them in some way are really on the margins of society. So they're recruited by this sort of shadowy cabal to compete in a battle royale, really to the death, in a series of children's games to determine who among them, which one among them will walk out alive and join the cabal's economic, if not social status, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's really a social satire disguised as I think a genre picture, ultimately.
Absolutely.
I mean, it's in the tradition of like the Hunger Games or any of these sort of battle royale, movies or shows, but it's really like, I think a very astute social satire. And I don't know about you, Tara, but for me, I'm actually quite ambivalent about this show. I really, really admire what the show is quote unquote about. And I have some ideas about what it's about, themes, and it's what it's trying to communicate. But I also found myself really repulsed in some way by very performative violence, the entire thing. That's sort of like where I am, whether I like I like it. I admire its ideas, but it was I thought it was very difficult to watch. What did you think? And what, of it?
I think because I had been warned that it was quote unquote a lot and
Yeah.
difficult to watch, that I went in sort of braced for that. And so that kind of desensitized me a little bit to the
Mhm.
level of violence. And because afterwards I was thinking, if I hadn't had that warning, I think that would have like kept me up.
Yeah, there's like a 15-minute like mass slaughter, and it just kind of
Right.
continues there. What did you guys, Matt? Did you have that reaction? What did you feel about the sort of aesthetics of the show?
Well, I think the two things are separate to me. I think that visually, the violence, I think I'm prepared for it because it's really a battle royale. And my mind went back to even something before that, Lawnmower Man.
Oh yeah,
Yeah, correction, Running Man.
The book's actually one of the few books that I've like proper novels that I've read from start to finish over a couple of days. The novel is a lot closer to something like this, but it's actually played out over a city where you're hunted, and if you survive for 2 days, you get the money sort of things. But I think visually, we can become acclimatized to violence too much, too easy. Something like this is usually like in torture porn, right? Like in The Saw or like in a Final Destination. But I think when you put it in what's something that's effectively like a dramatic series, very character heavy and character driven, I think it makes you actually tune into what you're watching, which you don't usually do, which you're not usually made to do. Big titted animal that gets slewn in the first 5 minutes of a horror film for fucking in the bushes. You don't have any attachment to it. But what this did very carefully and considerately done was give you emotional attachment to somebody that was actually, I mean, something like The Walking Dead did. But even then, zombies is so much more visceral and has more verisimilitude when it's a person against a person. And when you attach emotion to it, that it's not a climatic evil. It's people that don't want to commit these atrocities to each other. And I think the visceral nature of the violence is actually an important thing for us to check our expectations of what we are comfortable with.
My wife, she watched it before I did. She said, why the pink? Why is everybody in pink? Like, why these sort of like childlike colors and sort of video game set pieces and stuff like that? And that is a very, very, I think, interesting part of the aesthetics of the show. I'm wondering what you guys made of that. I have ideas, but I'm curious what you thought.
It goes back to the sort of like cubism, sort of modern art. You know, with this, who was the guy that did the the stairs that don't quite.
Escher.
Oh, Escher, yeah. Isn't it?
Yeah, Escher's Relativity, wasn't it? It's actually quite funny because Escher's story is kind of almost like has this dramatic irony to the series, because he was actually a really sickly child that wanted to be an architect, and he was so ill, he missed so many of his final exams and of his education, even as a child, that he scraped through everything, but he was never able to become an architect. But from that, he used the geometric shapes and patterns to become a success in postmodernist, cubist art, if it's happenstance of what it is. But if you see somebody that was basically trying to achieve something but always losing, then all of a sudden becomes good at something through fortune of circumstances. Escher's journey to be an Escher is almost reflective of the TV show.
Boom.
Big boom.
Yeah,
that's much more complex than my thoughts on it. I think the show, at least to me, I mean, it's about many things. I don't know if it's meant to be a Marxist critique of capitalism, but certainly a critique of capitalism. Very, very astute about Marxism. But I also read it as the sort of Primo Levi dilemma of the death camps in Nazi Germany. Couldn't unsee that once I saw it for the first time. But I read the childlike aesthetics of the sets and the colors in the context of this sort of capitalism critique. Because I thought, like, one of the things about that capitalism does to people is it dehumanizes them, right? It dehumanizes both the worker and the capitalist. And what better way to dehumanize a person than to infantilize them? So I thought, like, the children's games, the like pretty little colors, the fun little video game sets were part of that kind of theme about infantilizing the players. And so I read it in that context. I did not see the Escherian elements, but I confess that is much more interesting than my reading.
Are we going to bother with the names? There's
No,
point
just
trying to do the names.
if you
Let's just do it by defining characteristics or number, even if we know that.
Yeah.
So the old dude that ends up being the guy behind the machination, like, I don't care about that. This foreshadowing, whatever. You can watch it back, and he's always ahead. Whatever. Like, that's just the standard twist. I worked out who the guy in the black mask was very, very early on. In the very opening sequence, there is like a lot of premise put on these people that were Squid Games. 2 of them were in the game, and there was somebody else there. This is that guy, the black mask is definitely that guy. He is definitely that guy. But then I thought about it more and more, and the emphasis on that at the very beginning of playing children's games, the whole thing through it of children, and the fact that you had the main character, the nice guy that won it, and the guy that was like the hero that went to business school from his area.
Yeah.
That, for me, it was, and again, I think you extract from it what you will, and you can be over clever, and you can find things that link together that aren't what were meant to be there originally. But for me, it was about corruption of the innocent of childhood and the perversion of childhood, that you had these 2 guys with equal opportunity, not equality of outcome. You had one that had to steal and beg, and he was a scumbag. You're rooting for the worst of the worst, stealing from his mother, can't take his daughter out for dinner. He's in debt to gangsters, and yet he becomes the central protagonist and the guy that ends up winning it. And then you have the businessman that works a lot harder than he has, but through the innocence of childhood, they were both corrupted by success and lack of success. And through the games, there's this great juxtaposition between almost like the modern 7 deadly sins of capitalism, whereby everyone had been betrayed by a system, whether they succeeded or failed by it.
Really?
There is a pressure through being successful, maintaining success, and not having success. And it kind of, to me, the whole childhood game thing, it was kind of like there's this corruption of the innocence of childhood. Like, it doesn't really matter wherever you end up, you're going to end up and your experience.
Yeah, and that's really, I think, supported by the revelations that player 1, ultimately gives. Like, even throughout the show, he talks about, this reminds me of and the place where I grew up, right? One of those final games, the marble game, right?
Yeah.
He's like, so it's always harking back to that. And in fact, at the end, the big reveal really does connect up to the theme you're talking about, Matt. And I think the theme that I saw too, which was this idea that capitalism corrupts not just the worker, and it's obvious throughout the show, that critique, but it also corrupts the capitalist, the owner of the capital. And player 1 is a stand-in for that. So when he talks about at the end, like on his literal deathbed, talking about how he designed the game because he couldn't feel anything anymore, right? And that is, he's telling you right out loud. That it's the critique personified, right? That this lifetime of accumulating money, which effectively killed him, right? And he was go back one last time to feel what it was like to feel again. And that version of it connects up right to what you're saying, Matt. It's a feeling of getting back to what it was like to be a child. So yeah, I agree.
And when you look at things like Wolf on Wall Street, when I don't know if it's when we're introduced to Jonah Hill, but when they're having that massive drugs party and he's just standing in the middle of the room masturbating when his wife walks in, she's like, "What are you doing?" He's like, "Just fuck off and let me finish." It's almost like the progression of pornography. Like, once you've seen like 100 women being bummed, then you sort of look at like maybe something a little bit more spicy, and then after that, what comes next? A little bit more spicy, and then before you know it, you're fucking heavily into dogs and women, and your mum's fucking cancelling the internet. No, but you know what I mean, though. Like, there's always a one-upmanship to maintain on equilibrium. If you know what I mean.
Totally, yeah, exactly. And all that stuff, it's like it's very well drawn out because you can see the human element to that fact in your own probably experiences, but it also connects up to this sort of like broader social critique, which I thought was just very beautifully done by the show.
I'm becoming increasingly tired of the multiple tiered ending trope that seems to be, well, this was career, but the first thing I can remember is obviously the 6 endings from Lord of the Rings or whatnot. Like, I get it. I always think that, like, when they walk off into the distance, I always go, all right, I'd just like to see them having a cup of tea and make sure they're all right afterwards. But like when you have a whole episode of basically postscript, come on, dude.
Yeah.
Come on, man. Can we have wrapped this up?
Was the final game in the? Is there any games in the last episode, or is that the last?
No. It's already wrapped up. It's entire postscript.
Yeah, it's like there's like an hour of postscript. Yeah, I remember looking at just my Netflix thing and thinking like, okay, he won the game. There's still like 2 hours left. What is going on here? So
do you know what I want to talk about, Tim?
I thought I did.
Do you know what I want to talk about?
Yeah.
Do you know what I want to talk about?
What?
Do you know what I want to talk about? Do you?
Tell us.
Hey? I want to talk about you, Tim. No, I'm joking. In the wise words of Salt and Pepper, let's talk about sex, baby.
That could go so many ways. Where's he going? Does he want to push it good, or does he want to talk about sex, baby? I don't know which way.
You tireless scamp, Tara.
Thank you.
And that's why we wanted you here.
Even though you call me the new girl.
So, for me, right, Tim, let's get off the fucking like highbrow. When I'm talking about sex, what I'm talking about is let's stop trying to be so clever and get down and dirty with this. Now, what I want to say to you, Tim, is you're a clever man. I love you for it. You're an attractive man. Because of his swole intellect, he is a lubricious man by nature. Right. So what I mean about talking about sex, Tim, let's get down and dirty on this one. That's what I'm saying to you. I don't want to. We've gone highbrow. That's what we do. I ain't afraid to say it. We're good at that. But what I want to do is ask you now, how the fuck could this ever exist in real life? They're whipping people up like right, left, and centre off the streets of Seoul and Tokyo, in Athens, in London, and Paris for this multinational game of squids. One local policeman's asking questions, just one, and they're not even trying to be clandestine about it. They're whipping them up in like blacked out limousines and then just dumping them back on the street. This ain't ever going to happen, is it, in real life? It's fatally flawed.
It is
what I'm
saying. And they
try
to address that. And I think the first episode, or it might have been one of the earlier episodes where it was once they vote to get out of the game. What's his face? 456 goes to the police station. Is like, you got to do something about it. But they would have been rough not doing that at all because because there would be hundreds of missing people. And we're not talking about down and outs or drug addicts or homeless people or prostitutes or hookers or whores or ladies of the night. We're talking about somebody.
We're talking about like legitimate people with jobs and families.
One of whom the police are actually looking for. You might want to look into this,
And not one of those people said, look, they don't leave like, the classic trope of if you don't see me in fucking 10 days, open this envelope or something. Do you know what I mean? Or like a little microfilm or something. Like, it's preposterous. Like, the first thing I would do is tell one person what was going on. And like, this is fucking weird. Do you think I should do it?
Yeah.
Like, it's that straightforward. Yeah. Like, there is no way something like this could be hidden.
And it's only the one guy.
Not in today's.
Like, the one cop who's looking after it, but only because he's missing his brother. Yeah, it's not plausible. And I think they should have just sort of ditched that entire section of that episode because it just draws attention to the fact that it's so implausible. And their attempt to explain it away, like, oh, we don't believe these crazy people talking about death games, is just like, it's not successful.
No, it's not. I do believe as well that just because they've all volunteered themselves to go back, that sort of instantly disqualifies them for ever changing their mind again. Because for me, there was a clear line drawn in the sand when it went from survival of the fittest to adversarial. They took a war thing where it wasn't if you're good enough you survive to literally half of you are going to die. Half the people in the that you look at the opposition and go, yep, fuck it, I'm out. There's a suspension of disbelief, but everything else has to work. I think it spent too much time trying to be clever about characters, and it didn't focus enough on being clever enough about plot.
Yeah, about actually carrying off the plot. The interesting, I don't know if you remember, but when they vote out, the mastermind, number one is to cast the final vote to leave. Yeah. I mean, I think they kind of answered that in the end where he talks about it's a way of scrubbing your conscience. You chose to come back. I gave you an opportunity.
Yeah, that was good. Yeah.
So I thought that was like kind of interesting, but yeah, I don't know. As a story, I I don't think it's that successful. That's why I sort of am a bit ambivalent about it. I like the ideas that they had to shoehorn the game into a real life to make these sort of satirical points, but ultimately you can't think too closely about it, or it's not gonna be as fun.
What I will always have patience for, especially visually, is something that tries very hard but falls down. I would rather that in almost every instance. Yeah, I think it has got a lot of faults. I mean, there was a whole thing about it being fair, about giving people that have been corrupted by capitalism this opportunity to prove themselves one last time, because in here everything's fair. But then time and again, it's the most manipulated game possible. Whenever the participants have the upper hand, they're always undermined by the controllers. I'm talking about the controllers. I actually really like. It's in the same way that, I mean, God, this is funny, right? That American cinema is worried about having an all-Asian cast, but no Chinese production companies worrying about having an all-white cast for representation, right? What I love about this is in the same way that anime, I fucking struggle to say that. I just don't like that. I just don't like it. Just makes me feel icky. It's an Japanese animation.
Yeah.
They do all Westerners with like fucking huge eyes, like disproportionately big eyes. The American billionaires were the most tokenistic, racist thing I have ever seen openly on television. And the acting was so bad. And that made me think, this is making me realize why China didn't like Shang-Chi, didn't like The Farewell, it didn't like Mulan, it didn't like It's Not Going to Show Eternals. As Westerners watching that, it is so disrespectfully characteristic racist white Westerners. But they probably didn't do it for that. They were just being like, okay, you are the American people, be American people. I'm starting to understand now the reflection of that of why China doesn't like it when the West tries to do China or Eastern films.
Because it's always a martial arts film. It's like eye roll, like,
Yeah.
such a caricature.
Yeah.
So over the top.
I don't know what it was. I haven't gotten far enough in to interpret the colors scheme and everything that you were just talking about, Tim, and I'll be looking for that, and we can talk about that offline. But or if it's good enough, maybe you'll allow the new girl back on for 5 minutes. That would be
not with that attitude.
Hey, I'll be cheeky right back to you if you want to, if you want to play that way. But anyway,
that's why we booked you,
yeah,
Tara.
thank you.
I want cheek.
Bring all the.
I want all 4 of them. Baby.
Yeah, well,
give me some cheek.
I'm not even going to say what I'm thinking right now.
I am a very handsome man, but still pale in the shadow.
I was going to say, I'm still trying to give Tim some credit. But anyway, I had, for some reason, a bit of a flashback to The Prisoner with the aesthetics behind the scenes. Did that happen to anybody else? Did anybody else miss a lot of classes because they discovered The Prisoner at the wrong time when they were in school, the reruns of The Prisoner?
Oh, I thought you were talking about the Hugh Jackman.
No, the original, the BBC Prisoner that we got over here much later.
I don't know it.
Oh, Cell Block H. Cell Block H. Yeah.
And I don't even know if I was right to say Cell Block H. The one where the spy gets a burn notice and he gets sent to an island and he's always asking who's number one. No, that prisoner.
I don't know that
one. Patrick McGowan, I think.
I don't know.
Well,
how old is it?
It's older than me. It was already a rerun in the 70s. I think it's from the 60s. Okay. But yeah, the aesthetics of how things were run and cartoonish and childish in the background and never being able to get an adult answer for an adult question gave me that reference point. Somebody besides me has to have seen it somewhere. There's someone nodding somewhere that's listening to us right now.
The guy from Brussels.
Do you know what? Look, I actually think that last week might have been the first week that he didn't listen to us.
I did listen.
The irony.
I did listen.
No, not you, bro.
No, not you.
The person when you gave the shout out. Oh.
Brussels friends. Let me open up Safari. Let me have a looky loo.
Let me make my one final point about this show, I guess. So one thing I think it did really successfully, though not pleasantly, is you got this, like we talked about, this sort of infantile vibe set against what is truly like an Auschwitz-like reality within this game.
Yes.
The drab barracks. The central dilemma is this idea that to survive this game requires complete solidarity amongst everyone, right? You can vote yourself out of the game, but complete solidarity is absolutely impossible at the same time. they recognize that you have to team up, right? Cooperate.
Mm.
And they develop, in the context list, they develop these like real tender moments, accumulation of these small moments of getting to know someone, learning about them, and just like these small tendernesses that accumulate over the course of the show. All the while you realize that each of them are marching towards like quite literal annihilation. Struck me as, Auschwitz like. It was, I thought, very, very successful and very sad at the same time.
Yeah.
A couple of things that I've written down here that tie into that. I think decency is a privilege. Loyalty is a privilege. Trust is currency.
Yes, totally.
Yeah, well said.
To trust,
I'm trying to
essential. Trust as currency is so important. I mean,
that's deep. I like that.
You have to both trust and be trusted, but the game is set up that,
and it is a big deal.
They're impossible. Yeah.
So you're laying your life on the line, literally, to trust someone. But if you can't,
God, the worst one was
like that's the thing with Ali. Like Ali and
I was about to say that Ali. Yeah, that was so bad, dude. That was
so painful.
And you can't fault him. I know it's like a disingenuous way of doing it, but what difference does it make? Like someone had to die.
Yeah, you can't fault either of them, really. It's like,
God, I need to clear the rest of my weekend to finish these now.
It was like the emotional high point of the show and stuff.
And talking about emotional high points, I mean, when I say that, that's my politically correct name for my erection. Jung Hoyeon. Oh my God. She's the one that got stabbed in the neck right at the
She's
death.
a 40.
She is fucking sensational. Honest to God. If someone said to me, you have to kill your mother and you will be caught by this time next week, but she will love you for that week, I would have to flip a coin. Because my emotional integrity, but my sheer bloodlust to kill my mother. No, I'm joking. I wouldn't do that. I mean, it's kind of like a win-win situation. No, I'm joking. My mum's a lovely lady. That just got really sinister. And probably too right. The important thing is there are some ladies in the world that are sexy enough for me to kill my mother. And my mum would like it because she would sacrifice herself knowing that was her legacy. Oh,
so funny. Yeah, that number 67, man, she is like a 50 out of 10.
Oh, dude, the other lady that got brought in, when they're doing tug of war and she went intentionally to get the other lady.
Yeah.
Did you think that was Yuriko from the Wolverine? I was convinced it was her. Not Yuriko.
I did not put that together, but I did feel like I'd seen her before.
The one that was kind of like his guide that brought him back to Japan.
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought they are so similar.
Yeah.
I'd love them so much they'd burst.
Oh, so great.
How much can I pay them to listen to this?
Oh, man.
Oh,
shit.
I missed you guys.
Right, let's
shit, guys. That was a good discussion.
Do you want to shoot off, Tim?
Yeah, yes, thank you. Great to see you guys. Good conversation.
Yeah.
Good to see you.
Thank you for being a part of it.
See you soon. That was fun.
Not fixing the outro in post, but I'd like to thank Tim. Thank you very much, Tim, for all your glorious contribution this week, and big thanks to Tara for making herself available at the crack of dawn to join us on this week's podcast. And of course, thanks to me as well, because I'm pretty cool as well. So yeah, good episode, I feel. And that only leaves me one thing to say. We have been, and this is the end.